Hello and welcome to our second to the last week of our last 60 days of 2020. And yeah, truly it's been an unforgettable year. And we could put a lot of adjectives on that, on describing our year. But I will say that if you're here, you are a resilient and hopeful person for sure. But to really proactively dig in and make some change means that you are resilient. So I just really applaud you for being part of this process. And thank you for being open to me offering some support to you in this process. It's been really fascinating and fun to do this again. And this is my third year doing it, but I've done it in a totally different way every year. So anyways, thank you. And I really hope that it's been a good last 60 for you. And how you measure that is so subjective. You know, it's not really an objective way to, it's not really something that, we could just say it's the best if you had this happen, or it's the best if, you had all the money in the world, because that isn't the answer. It's the best because of the work that you do on the inside. So interestingly, the last two categories of the Wheel of Life are spirituality and personal development. And I saved these for the end, not because they're the least important. If anything, they're the most important to me. And I will say that on the Strengths Finder, the Clifton Strengths Finder inventory, among my top 5 strengths is learner. So personal development and learning is really like my happy place. So I really carved time to make that happen. And when you think about what you scored yourself on personal development and spirituality, I really encourage you to look at, what were the levers, what added to a score that might be over 5, and what was missing if your score was under 5. So those are two ways to look at these two things. The other thing is spirituality. I'm doing this course actually on Mind Valley, and the teacher of the course said that spirituality is something that grounds you but also lifts you up. So it's one of those really interesting categories. And it's not about your religion. And if anything, at this point in our life, we may have veered or chosen something, different or deeper than the religion or spiritual tradition that we grew up in. So if you feel like you haven't quite made a shift away from, that's something to think about, like why or why not. And if you feel like it's something that you'd like to return to or find a formal religion or spiritual practice, it's a really good opportunity to do some exploring. I grew up Catholic, and even though I don't consider myself a practicing Catholic because I veered so far from what a traditional Catholic does, I still have it in my DNA, in my cells. I don't think, oh, it's Christmas and there was no Jesus and that was just a myth. I still celebrate, the story that really gave me hope. And in fact, during this time, I actually think that one of the miracles was Mary saying yes to a very difficult situation that ended up leading to Jesus being born to a virgin, and whether that's exactly how it happened or we don't know. I mean, we were passed down stories through generation and generation and generation. But the main thing is, I think that it's pretty incredible that a young woman said yes to a very difficult situation that led to a bigger story or another big story unfolding that changed thousands, millions of people's lives and generations of lives. That's the miracle that I believe in and I celebrate. And I think that just kind of coming back to, who am I from the religion that I grew up in, or the spiritual tradition that I grew up in, and what am I taking forward, is something to think about and to own your spiritual autobiography. And everyone has one. That's the thing, is it's not just for saints, it's for everyone to really own their spiritual autobiography. In the Buddhist tradition, there is, and I'm not Buddhist either, but I'm just using this metaphor. When someone commits to Buddhism, they call it taking refuge. And so what I'm pulling from that is this idea of like a spirituality, a spiritual practice is a place that we go to regularly enough that when things go down or things go up or we're not sure and we feel lost, that there's actually a refuge to go to. And that place is usually inside, and for some people it might be a physical place, but that we actually have a place to go to when things get rough, and it feels like a refuge. And even if it's a saying or a philosophy or a song, sometimes a song gives me refuge, that we actually have that in place before things fall apart. And sometimes it's when things fall apart that we actually have to look for the refuge. Because I believe the way that I do, I think that it's actually there for us. It may not be so simple, but I believe that actually that's when we get the most meaning out of our spiritual journey, is when things do fall apart. Start to think about where you are on that scale of 1 to 10 and how or if you want to leverage it up or feel really good about where it's at and keep doing what you're doing. And if you don't have a lot of emotion around it, I wouldn't actually change much, because it's one of those things that it's an inner practice. Although, there's I would say just be curious. If you have no emotions around the word spirituality, I would just say get curious about what feels comforting to you when things get hard and sad or confused or empty, because those times are going to happen, and I just really want you to have a space or a place or a place in your mind and heart to go to. And then look at how you scored yourself in the area of personal development. And again, that's like my happy place, which doesn't always mean I score a 10. It just means that that's where I have the most energy, and it's easily a place that I put a lot of time and energy in. But again, look at it where it is. If it's under 5, notice what's missing. And if it's over 5, notice what you've been doing that has leveraged it up. And again, it's one of those things that it's like filling the gas tank. Like you want to fill it before you go empty and not realize you're empty and you're like, oh, I better learn something. And in terms of personal development, it can range from anything like learning a hobby, like cooking, or a sport, or just reading nonfiction books that you're learning something about. Like it could be that simple. It could also be like, I always wanted to get a PhD in literature or something like that. Like there's a big spectrum of what personal development is. And then there's also kind of the personal productivity, sort of like the executive coaching would fit into this, or learning something in your particular skill or trade, like leveraging up in terms of career. Like that could also be personal development leverage. But think about, where you are with that. And again, it's something that kind of is building you along the way, that you want to have some input in, some action happening before you get to a place where you're like, oh, I think I need a hobby. Because actually, I was in my late 20s when I was realizing that everything I did had to do with the Catholic Church. My job was in the church. My social life was pretty much in the church. My hobbies was doing things or going to church or spiritual things. And I was like, God, I really need a hobby, something that kind of got me out of, that milieu of just the, spiritual stuff. Because that was an easy place for me. And that's when I took up yoga. I really enjoyed yoga, and I didn't see it as a spiritual or religious practice. I liked it. I didn't think it was devoid of spirituality, but that's not what I was missing. So anyways, that could, lead to something. You've heard this phrase, right? That change is inevitable, but growth is intentional. And that's kind of what you want to look at when you're looking at these two areas, is what's the intentional way that I'm growing spiritually? What's the intentional ways that I want to personally develop? And it could be looking at your wheel of life and realizing like, oh, my relationships are not as strong as I want them to be. And I, might need to take a class, read a book, spend a little bit more time figuring things out in my relationships. It's one of those things that the more that you put some effort in this area, other areas of your life really change purposefully, intentionally, in the way that gets you where you want to go. Because all that we're working on in terms of this plan, this wheel of life, and setting us up for our best 2021 is like setting our GPS. Like, where do you want to go and I think that for this group, that you're intentional about living your best life. So really look at these two areas as the fuel, like really filling yourself up for the kind of journey, the kind of life that you want to live. And the other thing I'm going to add to this is have a morning ritual. And I'm not saying have my morning ritual and don't have, some person's morning ritual that you looked up on the internet who you admire, because that's what works for us. Like, find what works for you. And if you have an hour to wake up a little earlier, or an hour to do, now without a commute, that's an opportunity. But do a practice, do something every morning that sets you up for your best that day. Because here's the thing, if you want to have a great life, learn to have a great day. That's a very common sort of miracle morning community kind of thing, saying, but I think it's really true. If you could really work on, how am I going to live this day amazingly with my best self, do that. And building your best life comes from day-to-day living. So this is our second to the last video, and I hope that it's been really helpful for you. My heart is in it every week, and I'm always thinking about what I'm going to put into these videos. And I'm always thinking about you. I really am. I'm really hoping that they land well for you. I'm really open to feedback and, what you might need to make it better. If you have any burning questions, please email me back. And also, if you're interested in going deeper, reach out to me, because I have a pretty full library that I could suggest some books that if there's areas that you might want to take, or if there's courses you might want to take, if you want to do coaching with me, or if you're looking for a specific kind of coach. I know a lot of people who do coaching, but really, I am a stand for you living your best life. And thanks for being part of my community in whatever ways that you have. And please reach out to me. Have an amazing week.